Today starts the beginning of what I hope to be a new regular posting called the Weekend Watchage, where I will talk about the TV and film and other video-age that I watched during the past week, since I tend to watch stuff pretty regularly. And this channel is not just books. I'm in the midst of a Star Trek Next Generation rewatch. I'm about to post season 6, so almost finished with Next Gen. So that may or may not have posted already, or I may post this video first, I'm not sure. But anyway, I want to talk briefly a bit about some of the things I've watched in the recent past. So last week, I watched a couple of interesting things. So the first couple of things that I watched, I've been meaning to revisit the first Mad Max film. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I watched it a long time ago, maybe in the 90s for the first time. And I remember liking it somewhat, but also it not being very memorable in a lot of ways. And I'm a huge fan of The Road Warrior. So my dad took me to see The Road Warrior when it came out. I think it was 82. So I saw The Road Warrior first run in the theater when I was a kid. And, you know, I think that same year, Road Warrior came out the same year as Escape from New York. There were, Raiders was around that time. Like, it was an insane time to be a young teen and to go to the movies. Like, these incredible franchises, First Blood, Yankee came out, were coming out. So anyway, but it was interesting to rewatch now since he's gone on to make a bunch of Mad Max films. So there's Mad Max, 1979, Road Warrior, which I think is 82, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which was in the 90s, then obviously Fury Road, 2015, and the most recent Mad Max Furiosa was a couple of years back. I'm not exactly sure when. So Mad Max, the first film, is really kind of a 70s revenge movie. Mel Gibson plays Max Rockatansky, a police officer who drives a car, and it's kind of, the prompt of the movie is, in the near future or the day after tomorrow kind of thing. Civilization's kind of breaking down in Australia, and most of the movie takes place on the road, where these, patrol cars are patrolling, and there's biker gangs and bad guys in really souped up cars. And, so there's some action set pieces that start out, and then Max becomes, the target of the gangs, and then there's something that happens to him and his family, and then he gets revenge. And it ends with him kind of going off into the wasteland, setting up the Road Warrior. But what was interesting is really seeing what was to be full-blown George Miller style in Road Warrior. Like, Road Warrior was incredible in sort of the widescreen, just big sounding Brian May soundtrack, horn soundtrack. And you get the beginnings of it in Mad Max. It's, he did it on a shoestring, him and his partner. And it's, the dialogue is ridiculous. It's very much a low budget B movie. But there's a decent amount of scenes where the vistas open up. There's a brief scene with a tractor trailer rig, which kind of foreshadows the ending of Road Warrior. And he just has a way of putting the camera certain places where it opens up the screen. And it reminded me of Steven Spielberg's TV movie Duel, which was his first feature. And it's interesting because with Spielberg, Duel, the first movie, you see what's going to be with Jaws and Raiders and Close Encounters. Like, it's all there in Duel. It's an amazing movie. It's basically, Jaws on wheels. It might even be free on YouTube at this point. There's a kind of a hapless innocent who winds up being terrorized by this tractor trailer on this lonely stretch of road. And it's amazing what he does with the camera, and you really get a sense of his style. And then the next movie he made was Sugarland Express, where you see none of these things. You watch Sugarland Express, and it's like another director. And then Jaws hits, and you're like, oh yeah, this is the guy who did Duel. So, but very much George Miller with Mad Max. I mean, the next film he did was Road Warrior, but you just see the beginnings of his style. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And I liked it a little more upon rewatch. The characters are great. Max's boss is this kind of old-timey guy with handlebar mustache. The car chase scenes are great. The filming Miller said, they used a lot of low angle camera work because out in the desert, you wouldn't get the illusion of speed if the camera was too high because nothing was going by in the periphery. Whereas you get the illusion of speed when things are whipping by the camera. So he lowered the camera to the ground and did a lot of low angle shots. So the ground, you could kind of sense the ground moving by at an incredible rate. And it works really well. So right away, you notice that there's an interesting eye behind the camera. So it was a really fun rewatch, fun to see. And Mel Gibson really hadn't yet emerged. Road Warrior is kind of, to me, when he kind of punched through. I think his face was a little more chiseled. He was a little bit older. He looked more like the movie star we know, Mel Gibson. This one, he's still kind of young and pudgy. I think he had just done Gallipoli, where he was, when he was young, he really looked young. And so he still kind of looked fresh-faced here. So he's supposed to play this badass cop, and he doesn't quite make the mold. But anyway, it's an interesting film. If you're curious, if you've been blown away by Fury Road and you've gone back and maybe watched Road Warrior and Thunderdome, and you're curious at how this all started, it's worth a watch. Really, it really much is. So after that, of course, I had to watch The Road Warrior again, and I own it on Blu-ray. So I rewatched it, and it's my favorite Max movie, even over Fury Road, because I feel like of all the Mad Max movies, it has the most heart. And Max Rokitansky is not that deep of a character. He doesn't have a big arc. In the first movie, you take a good man and you broke him down to become this kind of revenge machine, and then left him there. And then in The Road Warrior, he's kind of rehabilitated. He is that outcast who's only out for himself. He's kind of Han Solo in The Road Warrior. And it has heart. It has the feral kid, this young kid who befriends him when he, ends up in the oil refinery, and he gives him the little toy that makes noise. And he's still kind of on his own until he finally cracks up, and he's got nowhere else to go. And then he finally comes back, and he said, "I'll drive the tanker," and does his first selfless act since the first movie. But it's wonderful, and what's great about it, it's amazing actually that Miller figured this out, because from Road Warrior to Thunderdome looks fake. Thunderdome looks like Hollywood Mad Max, whereas Road Warrior does not. Road Warrior still looks a little gritty and a little indie, and all of the makeup. I mean, think about all of the post-apocalyptic films that came after Road Warrior. How influential the hockey pads and the mohawks and all the face paint, and just the way those costumes looked, and how weird they all were and how crazy they were. The guy who plays Wes, who ends up being kind of the main antagonist besides Humongous, who's got the wrist crossbows, really cool. He's wonderful. Humongous is great. I mean, what a bizarre, foreshadowing Immortan Joe to come in Fury Road. But again, the filming, from Mad Max, it just opens up. It's just the world. And they location scouted, and they found this mountain, like this kind of hill in the middle of the desert, where they were able to put the camera, and kind of Max hides out there for a while before the movie starts. But from that hill, you could do a 360, and you didn't see any other civilization. So it was a beautiful on-location setting, and they made the most of it. They built the refinery, so everything looks real. It didn't, like, Fury Road got cartoony, and Road Warrior wasn't yet as cartoony as Fury Road was going to be. It was still kind of very gritty and very realistic in a lot of ways, as crazy as it was. But it's an amazing movie. And, the wonderful twist ending, and the feral kid, it turns out that the feral kid is doing the voiceover. Like, it's just a wonderful movie. It was such a great rewatch. I thrilled to it all over again. It was really wonderful. And then I did a little bit of research, because I'm still blown away by Fury Road. I mean, when is the fourth installment in a franchise like the second best movie in the franchise? Like, I don't know where you would ever see that in any other film franchise, where the fourth movie in the franchise is like number 2. Because I rate them as Road Warrior for me is first, Fury Road second. I would choose the first Mad Max third, then Furiosa, then Thunderdome last. Thunderdome's kind of just, it was a misfire. There's no car chases. He's in Bartertown doing all this crazy stuff. It looks kind of fake. not really a fan. But what was amazing about Fury Road is that Fury Road that came out in 2015 was already storyboarded and planned within an inch of its life in 2000. They were gearing up to start shooting in the year 2000. They found a setting in, I think, Namibia in Africa. They went there, they were building the cars, getting things ready. 9/11 happens. And something happened to the currency all over the world where they lost like maybe 2/3 of their budget just in terms of currency, things going up and down. They had to abandon the shoot. So he didn't know when he was going to get back to it. He went on to make other things. He made Happy Feet 2, other movies. They start gearing up to shoot again in the 2010s. They're going to shoot now in Australia. Film is exactly the same storyboards, nothing changed. They're starting to build the cars again, gearing up, and suddenly there's this monsoon. The incredible period of heavy rains in Australia right before they were about to start production. So they had to scrap everything again. A couple of years went by. They finally said, okay, let's try again. Let's go back to Africa. We're going to film there now. The money was right. The currency was right. And then finally, 2012, 2013, 2014, they finally started to film. So I couldn't believe it. A film 15 years in conception. And the film that we saw in 2015 was storyboarded out to the letter in 2000. So anyway, just a little bit of a side story. I was blown away by that. I watched a documentary. There's a couple of free documentaries on YouTube where you can watch it if you're curious. I may link it below in the description box. In the other action genre that I sampled, I watched the first two of the Man with No Name trilogy by Sergio Leone with Clint Eastwood. It had been a while since I've seen them. The library had the Blu-ray remaster with all three films on it, so I took it out of the library. I want to own it someday really bad. And what a treat. What an absolute treat. Fistful of Dollars, again, a takeoff on Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, which was done in the 60s. Lone man comes to town, plays two warring families off of each other, winds up, mayhem ensues, basically. And it kind of always blows me away when I rewatch Leone at how much he does without dialogue. He does so much visually. The scripts for those movies must be maybe 7 pages long. There's hardly any dialogue. Everything is done in scene. It's almost like he almost has silent movie chops. The duels take forever with the crazy soundtrack and the trumpets blaring as the camera cuts back and forth between people who are about to duel. I mean, he kind of invented an entire post-Hollywood Western genre. I mean, my God, the spaghetti Western has been so influential. The Western was never the same after these films. It was incredible. And they weren't huge hits when they came out. They didn't get released in the States right away. They were filmed in Italy. The reviews weren't great. If you go and look on Wikipedia, you can see that the initial reviews were like, it was stupid. And yes, it's a genre and it's very over the top. And, if you're going to the movies as a aesthetic moviegoer, there's a lot of clunky crap in them for sure. But there's a whole other layer of pleasure to be had by just the cinema in itself. And wherever he found to shoot in Italy, these wonderful, quote, Western backdrops, everything's in scene, no CGI, whatever's happening, it's there. Just the desert just stretches away forever, whatever's happening, vistas of desert is existing behind the characters. Just amazing. And then I watched the second one, where it's Lee Van Cleef and Clint Eastwood, and they both play bounty hunters after the same bad guy, who was also the main bad guy in the first movie. And they meet up, and when they first meet, and Lee Van Cleef is one of my favorite, genre actors. He's so good. They both play bounty hunters, so you get a sense of each one of them in their kind of little worlds, and then it turns out they're both after the same big bounty guy. And they meet in the town where the guy's going to show up, and then when they first meet, them getting to know each other, it's like a 10-minute scene with no dialogue, just shooting and other things. Again, a masterclass in wordless, pure cinema, which is just amazing. And the cinematography and the way he's using the camera, the way he's using movement, a step up even from the first movie. Like he's really learning and figuring things out. I think it was only his third movie. I think he made a movie called The Colossus of Rhodes, which was a sword and sandal movie in the early 60s. And then the second movie was Fistful. Then For a Few Dollars More, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Then he did A Fistful of Dynamite, which I still have to see, James Coburn, which I've never seen. But then he also did Once Upon a Time in the West, which was fantastic. Charles Bronson, Henry Fonda. And then I think he might have done one or two other films. And then the other big film that he did was Once Upon a Time in America, which was kind of the gangster saga that takes place, I think, in Atlantic City. Never saw it. I know there's a lot of different cuts of it. It's 1,000 hours long. I've heard mixed things about it. I've heard in some respects it's a boring slog. In other respects, it's brilliant. At some point, I'll have to get my arms around it. But I think Fistful of Dynamite is something that's going to come up in the future. And of course, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly I will see soon because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. So yeah, that was the weekend watchage. I also watched a bunch of Star Trek: The Next Generation season 6, which I finished, and so I will either have already posted that or will post it soon. So I'll do a whole season review and talk about my thoughts about the season and thoughts about individual episodes that I thought were great. So that'll be coming up. So yeah, so hopefully, I don't know, this will be maybe a weekly or twice a month that I will do kind of a watchage catch-up video because, it's YouTube. Why the hell not? Thanks for watching.